Prospects or suspects? That is going to be a topic we are going to hit on today in our Hitting with Holly podcast. Obviously, the Major League Baseball trade deadline passed. We're recording this literally on Wednesday, the day after the trade deadline, the final day of July now. And there was a lot. I'll say this for Major League Baseball. If they wanted to create a buzz and create a culture of trades, they succeeded. Trades were made left and right, and so it kept everybody who pays attention really happy. And in their podcast today, we're going to kind of break things down in our perspectives. We're going to focus a lot on one of the busiest teams, and that's in our home backyard team that Todd Hollandsworth and I are very familiar with, the Miami Marlins, because they, in this, 7 guys off their big league roster were moved yesterday. And when you count in the last week or so in this kind of trade deadline window, 9 total when you add in A.J. Puck to Arizona and Jazz Chisholm Jr. to the New York Yankees. But with that, we kind of break it down from the start. And Holly, kind of as I introduced, we're dealing with prospects or suspects, because the narrative we've seen with Miami is, no matter what words you want to use, they're amidst their either 6th or 7th and the 2nd or 3rd fire sale and rebuild since Bruce Sherman took over in 2018. Holly, welcome, and weigh in, my friend.
Well, great to be with you, Joe. As always, we love talking baseball, and it's fun, certainly around the trade deadline. I certainly was a part of this throughout my career a couple of different times as I was getting a little bit more mature. It was definitely different back then than it is today. We would always kind of hone in on the teams that were willing to acquire players and teams that felt like they had an opportunity to push, and how are they going to push, and what were their finances, and, how everything was going to fit together. Today's conversation really, maybe there's a little bit of that, certainly with the higher end teams, but the general, at least in my opinion, the general consensus is always about the prospects. And, what is this going to look like for the younger teams, the teams that had put on the fire sales, and what do their futures ultimately look like? There were some obvious buyers. The teams that were in playoff contention all made some moves that they felt like were going to help their organizations. But with that being said, a lot of conversation, a lot of movement here in Miami, and really no surprise to either you or I would assume, right, Joe?
No, not at all, because the thing that was only lacked is the Marlins just weren't transparent. They basically, I use the word lie, they certainly deceived and misled. But when Peter Bendix was brought in to, take over a team that went to the postseason last year, and then proceed to do literally nothing in the offseason in terms of improving the big league roster, while not retaining a Jorge Soler, who was an all-star last year, hit 36 homers, took their 3 top players, 3 of their top players, I should say, to ARB hearings, meaning, Luis Arraez went to an ARB hearing, Jazz went to a high ARB hearing, Tanner Scott went to an ARB hearing. Jesus Luzardo, their opening day starter, was made clear he was in the offseason on the trade table, yet they said their goal was to compete for the now and the future, with never taking a step for the now. They got their self-fulfilling prophecy. They got some injuries to pitchers that they justified. Luis Arraez, they start off 0-9, terrible in April, traded Luis Arraez the first week of May, and then sent this signal that they weren't really competing. They fell to like 30 under and put themselves in a position where, well, what can we do? Well, everyone must go. And from in the last window of the trade deadline, 7 or 8 yesterday from the big league roster were moved. 9 total when you count A.J. Puck to Arizona, Jazz Chisholm Jr. to the New York Yankees within the last few days. So all under this trade deadline window or inside of it. And now the Marlins have 9. I've never heard of that much leaving a big league or, clubhouse at the same time. But clearly they're all popping champagne bottles because Fangraphs loves their moves, because the prospects are in. And the only way the narrative has shifted is to become a winner at the big league level, is to be strong in the minor leagues. But now your big league level has no bullpen, and you have a even further depleted starting rotation, and all your big bats have been moved in favor of close to big league ready prospects And I want to read you, Holly, a quote. I kind of read it. It is a statement by Peter Bendix, who obviously came over from the Rays. They know one way, move everyone out. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but part of it is our goal is to be a, quote, consistently competitive team. Well, they were a competitive team last year, went to the playoffs. With the talent and promising players we've acquired, they highlighted this part of the quote, Holly, by Peter Bendix. We are confident that we're moving in the right direction and building a deeper and stronger organization. If you were a player, one of the 9 left, so my math doesn't go, what they got, whatever is left, 17 that were returning in the clubhouse. What does that do for you? How excited are you to take the field these final 2 months with that kind of leadership at the top?
Well, you don't. I was just sitting here listening to you, Joe, and you making great points, certainly on everything that they're dealing with as an organization. As a player that played, against the Marlins earlier in my career with the Marlins, and then obviously after the Marlins, even in the broadcast booth, there's a theme here that's missing, and the theme and the word that I think Marlins fans really struggle with, because they've really seen none of it since this organization became an organization, a long time ago, is the word loyalty, and there is none. And when there's no loyalty, the players feel that. When there's, I remember many times, playing, certain places, our manager's contract would be up at the end of the year or something like that would be going on. I mean, we would feel all of that. These are all discussions that are spoken with the players, and, the players know they know what's going on. They know what's going on with the organization. They know what's going on, maybe not so much in the minor leagues, but they absolutely know what's going on in the clubhouse, and from the clubhouse up, they know what's going on. They pay attention, they talk, they see, they perceive, they see what's going on around baseball. It's what we do. It's our livelihood. It's, when I was doing this, it's what we did. And, if I was a Marlin right now, I would probably, be in the position, if I was a perceptive player, or maybe even a little bit of an older player, I would look back and say, well, this is what the Marlins have always done. And it's unfortunate, but it just brings me back to that key word of loyalty. And it just doesn't seem like there is any. There's no loyalty to the fans. There's no loyalty to the front office. I mean, there's just been so much change, and with change is very little loyalty. Loyalty takes time. Loyalty's developed. I kind of had mentioned to you, and I think this is a good time to bring them up. An organization that has been kind of in a very similar situation over the course of my career and over the course of the last, say, 20 to 30 years, which is the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, the Pittsburgh Pirates, they haven't had, this tremendous run of success. They had a couple of years where my guy Clint Hurdle was running the show in the, I think it was 2014, 2015. So, of course, that's a few years ago. But with that being said, there's loyalty there. There is kind of a way, and there's a defining, you may not like it, if you're a Pirates fan, but there's a thing that's in play. There's a system that's in play. There's a manager that's been there. There's a manager that's seeing this through. There is consistency to what they're doing. With the Marlins, there is absolutely no consistency. There is absolutely nothing. They change gears quicker than anybody I've ever seen. And what I mean by that is they'll change gears in the middle of a year. They'll change gears in the middle of a season. They'll change gears in the middle of a month. And, if you're a fan, how are you going to ever be loyal to something that has nothing to really stand on, no footing? And that's where the Marlins sit today. You can make all the promises in the world you want. It's fantastic. What Mr. Bendix said is a statement that has been uttered by many people who have sat in his seat before him for the Marlins, and have said the exact same thing. Well, we like our haul, we like our prospects, we like this, we like
layers
that.
of talent.
Yeah, but it doesn't turn into anything. Jazz is a perfect example of that. Like him or not, I was around when Jazz was brought up, and you could see the potential, you could see the talent, you could see the athleticism. But, I think some of the things that probably got out there, which are legitimate, was kind of like that older brother, kind of like honing things in, teaching this guy how to do it at the big league level. Not only just teach him how to be a great big league ball player, but teach them how to lead and teach them how to lead the next generation, especially when an organization is going to have so much turnover. You have to have people in play, not just managers and not just coaches. You got to have players who are going to help develop those younger players so that they pass the torch. It's how it works. And in the organizations where the torch passing goes on, there's consistency. There's some, I mean, it may not be, division championships and it may not be World Series, but there's going to be at least this level of development. Why is it do we constantly see Marlins players in their first, second, third year or their sixth year, leave and go play somewhere else, and there's almost always this instantaneous spike in their performance? I'm just so blown away by it. We talked about it when Arise got traded. Yeah. What did he do? The first game he has in San Diego, he goes 4 for 4, I believe. It might have even been better than that. And of course, you watch Jazz get traded to the Yankees, and what's he do? He's running the bases.
He's 3 days.
Right. I mean, he's had a couple of home runs, and I mean, it's like you see this. I mean, for us to ignore what we see would be silly, because I mean, it clearly speaks to the culture that either, what culture there is. To me, doesn't really seem like there's much of one, but it tells you that there's some level of freedom that these players are experiencing when they go somewhere else, and all of a sudden their performances start to elevate.
Yeah, and before we go much further, I might be breaking news on this, but and it stems to other departments, because I also heard yesterday, amid all those trades, at least 7 employees from the amateur side, meaning the side that does the baseball draft, were informed their contracts, they're all on 1-year deals, will not be renewed. So now you have 7 employees who are obviously inherited by Peter Bendix, but we wish them well. I'm a big fan of scouts. They mean a lot to me, and they're, to me, still the lifeblood more than any other. Obviously players are the game, but the scouts are the closest to the most honest brokers out there, and right. They will tell you what they think, and whether you want to hear it or not. And we wish them well. At least 7. We're talking area scouts, cross checkers, people who had a lot of fingerprints on the 2021 picks. The Marlins may have just made a couple of weeks back. But that also goes to culture too, Holly, and we'll highlight on stuff, and this is kind of funny, because two former employees reached out to me yesterday while I'm seeing on Twitter kind of this younger generation. Maybe they're new to these fire sales, and they think it's exciting and different, and they're following along with their reading of Fangraphs, and they think all is well and good. But both of them, their reaction to me was just sadness that here we go again, and kind of echoing what you said, but it's going to be different this time. And one even said maybe Bendix has the right plan. Maybe the analytics, 100% analytics, is the right plan. But, when you get down to it, they could have, and this would be the last I kind of say this, because I was waving the flag for them to re-sign Jorge Soler, keep Arise, try to go for it as much as you can in 2024. And then if it doesn't work, you can make moves at the deadline. But at least you showed your fan base that you cared. They chose not to do that. They didn't even really call call Soler, who basically was begging to stay. So these people may be laughing and saying, Joe doesn't know what he's talking about. But I was specifically told by some of these content create guys, young media, who don't have the experience, Holly, that I have, seeing and knowing that contracts could always be moved, and knowing that Soler's contract was not too heavy to begin with. Because what just happened, and this is why Alex Anthopoulos just tap dances around what we're doing here in Miami. He saw a reasonable contract. They lose Acuna. They have other players down. Albies, I believe, is down as well. They're trying to generate offense. Jorge Soler is outside of Miami and Seattle, the worst hitting ballpark. And, as a hitter, that San Francisco is, the days of Barry Bonds and the Giants are going to be a long way away. Hitters can't hit there. That ballpark's impossible. So Soler goes to this impossible ballpark to hit in, doesn't hit very well. Trying to, learning a lineup to be. We've talked before about, continuity in a lineup. But if they had kept Arise and Soler, then Berger becomes better, Bell becomes better, Jazz becomes better. It's a deeper lineup. But when you move them out, new guys come in, you're a little bit less. So what does Anthopoulos do? he basically gets Soler and what is it, Luke Jackson, the reliever, for Tyler Matzik, who replaceable lefty, although a good one, picks up the rest of Soler's contract. So the Giants, to their credit, moved a contract that wasn't working for them. There was a certain finder. That's why you do this. And I've known you can move contracts going back to when the Marlins back in 2012 or whatever, after year one in the new ballpark, and they traded Reyes and Mark Burley. And all these people were saying you can't trade Mark Burley because he was making like 60 something million. And I had Mark Wiley, who was actually working for the Rockies at the time, and he was in the press box. And I talked to him, and he goes, "Joe, someone will take on this contract. You always can move a contract." And Mark Wiley was right. They're able to move Burley as part of that trade with Toronto, which became a monster trade as well. But I kind of rambled on a bit, but it just kind of showed that you could get a Soler, who basically, I think the highest end prospect the Marlins got is the kid they got from Arizona when it's all said and done, because he has a real elite power, the guy that got in the A.J. Puck trade, De Los Santos. But that guy's profile comes out to looking a lot like, even though he's first base, but here's more of a DH, Brian De La Cruz or Jesus Sanchez. So you're basically adding what you're just moving out. You're not adding high end impact. They're just new names, new toys, new shiny objects for those who, the young people, I saw this covering the beat now, can cling to and just have a new storylines.
Yeah, it really is. It's unfortunate and it's sad. And I know that a lot of players, even a lot of my former teammates, Marlins guys from 03, I mean, we all kind of, we'll say a lot of the same things to each other and watching what goes on with our former club. And it's sad. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's the word that comes to mind. It's unfortunate. Fans do not buy in hope in a future over and over and over again. Places, that do this occasionally, certainly it's understood. I came here from Chicago. I was working in the broadcast booth in Chicago before I came to Miami, and working with the Cubs. And there was a transitional stage. Theo had come in. The way wasn't working, and they were going to invest in the younger generation, and the Chris Bryant and the Rizzos and the guys like that, and they knew and they gauged their clocks, and as they accelerated it probably a little bit quicker than maybe even the front office was expecting. They went out and got a John Lester. Guys that made sense. Dexter Fowler fit into the mold. I mean, of course, you've got Schwarber. Guys were coming through the system, and they would accelerate the process for the need at the major league level. And of course, that was always the key part of the conversation was these guys they're pushing themselves to get to the big league level, perform at a high level, and develop a winning culture. Where in Miami, you still feel like you're under the thumb of the front office at all times. And it's like, that development just doesn't happen. And it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened in quite some time. And it's very unfortunate. I really do feel for Marlins fans. There are fewer and fewer around here now because of the constant transition. No organization can constantly go out and promote transition and think that they're going to maintain any kind of loyalty from their fan base. And it just won't happen. Fans are not here to go to, the minor league ball games. They want to watch the big league team. They want to watch the big league team compete, and they want to watch them win. I mean, I get it. If you're playing, the way that our sport is kind of set up, and of course it's not fair on a lot of levels. You have teams that have bigger payrolls and bigger budgets than other teams. But there's not a way here in Miami that is sustainable. And it's very unfortunate to watch because to me, it's less about the finances. It's less about, who's running the front office, who's making the decisions. And it's way more about the culture. And my evidence, in my opinion, is the history of the organization. There's been good minds who have run this team. There have been good people who have been in place. There have been good scouts. There have been good people, good coaches, good managers. All of those boxes have been checked at one time or another, yet the winning hasn't followed. So what does that take you back to? It takes you back to the culture that is over the entire organization, and they have not been able to shed themselves of that. if you were a free agent right now, would you be interested in coming to Miami under any circumstances?
No, even if they sign you, they're going to trade you. So
yeah, I mean,
you're there.
Right. But you couldn't put a price tag on it. I mean, you couldn't, there's not, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're in a position, I think back to, I'll just give you a quick example. I remember kind of towards the end of my career, and there was this talk, Seattle had a nice run, year in and year out. And of course, a good good friend of mine, old teammate of mine, Jerry DePoto's running things there. And I knew Jerry pretty well for a long time, but you kind of understand how the turnover needs to be, and how do you develop something. Of course, they don't have a hitter's park, and so if you're going to go get a Prince fielder, you're going to have to overpay for a Prince fielder. And it doesn't mean that it necessarily is always going to work out, but the idea is that you're invested, that you're loyal, that you're in to your fan base, and then your fan base feels it and they want to move forward. So that experience has not been felt in Miami in a very, very long time. And so you're going to have those issues consistently until you put something out there. Everybody's going to expect the worst until you prove them wrong. And that's not going to happen overnight. No.
And this is the new reality. It's like this team on July 31st. And if they don't win tonight, they're going to enter August with 39 wins. And they're already at 68 losses. Last night's a prime example, because this is your new reality, because you moved a bullpen. This is what's kind of lost in all the jumping up and down. A bullpen that could win in the postseason, and a bullpen that the league was wanting, which was evident by all the arms that were moved in the bullpen. Tanner Scott was arguably, one of the top 3 closers in the whole sport right now, and you moved him. Not just him, you moved everyone else. Well, yesterday's game, Edward Cabrera, 5 innings, 5+. He ended up getting hurt in the 6th, and that's another issue now, the strain that's going to be on the starters. But he's leaving a game when he walks out there losing 3-2. He has 7 strikeouts, Holly, in 5+ innings. Relievers come in. Cronin picks up that 6th inning, gives up 4 runs. Then a guy named Kitchen, who I never heard of, 2 innings. He gives up 3 runs. That at one point 3-1, 3-2 Marlins lead, they end up losing 9-3. And I think this is what I've noted. Okay, you thought you brought in some bats, great. Well, now you depleted your pitching, and you might say everyone you're banking on next year, most of them are coming back from Tommy John, or real young, or besides Sandy, haven't really proven a lot. And you don't have a bullpen. And you think you want to be consistently competitive. Why was everyone overpaying on relievers? Because you need the relievers to get to the postseason. Right. And the Marlins all they did was move. They depleted their strengths, which were at one point their rotation and their bullpen. And now they still don't have a shortstop. These guys they traded for it. Everyone is being moved around to a different. They got a catcher in the Jazz trade who everyone I've talked to says he can't catch. So he has more of a first base profile. And the good kid I was telling you about, the guy who was at least an impactful bat from Arizona, he kind of is a DH. Well, that's kind of their profiles. Now, they're jumping up and down because they got, for the Tanner Scott deal, and the Trevor Rogers deal, that's the one that everyone's saying they fleeced the Baltimore Orioles over. Trevor Rogers, who still has 2 years of control, but you hit on something, Holly, before when you talked about finances, because the $1.53 million is going to go up in Arby as 2 more years. For Connor Norby, who isn't a very good defensive second baseman, and Kyle Stowers, who everyone thinks, I guess, is going to be a superstar, but is he going to be any better than Brian De La Cruz when it's all said and done? Very doubtful. So those are and everyone's saying, oh, they fleeced the Marlins. And what is Trevor Rogers, who has to be one of basically 9 guys to trade, are probably the happiest 9 guys in baseball. But Trevor now goes, he goes to he's probably right now pitching at a level of a number 4 starter, but he's with a powerhouse offensive team in Baltimore that he doesn't have to pitch shutouts. You know that. Yeah. These guys now can get out there, relax, and pitch.
Well, he's also joining a culture that's going, a culture that's, won over the last 2 seasons. I mean, like I said, I'll say two things to your points, which are once again, Joe, very good points. When it comes to how things operate down here and certainly in other places. But you look at what Baltimore is doing; they're developing a culture for the younger players. Trevor's going to go to Baltimore, and honestly, in all honesty, they're going to figure him out, whether it's as a 4-starter or whether it's as a bullpen arm. They're going to get the best out of him, and that's kind of my key here. Everybody isn't what they always think they are throughout their entire career. We love the stars. I mean, we know who Shohei Ohtani is, and Mookie Betts, and Aaron Judge. We know who those guys are. They define themselves, but a lot of players, they'll transition. We'll see guys go from being, solid starters to incredible relievers. We've had a few examples of guys who have been really dominant in the bullpen, making their way back into the starting rotation. The players define that, but the culture that they're being raised in helps the journey. And that is what I'm getting at when it comes to Miami, is that there's no culture of that. I think about if I was a young player today, like Bobby Witt Jr., let's take him, for example. We've watched this young man just light the world on fire. He's playing great baseball. People love this kid, as do I. I mean, he's a tremendous talent. And he's an organizational changing talent. But I think of how would he feel if he had stepped into the culture here in Miami, knowing what it is? Would we be still seeing the same Bobby Witt Jr. that we're seeing in today's game? And it's unfortunate that I say this out loud, but it really is my heart to the situation. Is I don't think Bobby Witt Jr. is the player that we see in Kansas City, that if he were to have to put a Marlins uniform on and start his journey as a Marlin, because it's too detached at the major league level. There's no level of consistency. There's no culture. Young players need the insulation of older players and older guys who have done it to make their careers go. And that's usually the way that it works. I mean, it really is just that simple. I remember feeling that. I mean, the best thing that happened to me as the youngest guy on a Dodger team in the 90s was that I was surrounded by veterans that showed me the way, that said, don't worry about this. We've got it. When it's your turn, you'll take the reins and, you'll step into this. And it made my life so much easier. And when you have these younger players and these younger talent, it has to start happening that way. And unfortunately, there just isn't a culture here. Culture isn't 1 year of Jorge Soler. That's not culture. Culture is players that are going to be there for 3 or 4 years that are going to help develop this. And you can't throw that on a Jazz. You can't put him out there and say, okay, Jazz, it's your responsibility. You've been here for 1 year, help change our culture. It doesn't work like that. Jazz needed to be in a position to be taught, learn, excel, get better, and then pass that on to the next generation. And part of this, Joe, which we really haven't touched on, but I'm going to throw it out because I really do feel like it's part of the conversation, is that the Marlins have found themselves in a position over the last 10 years to make moves at the top of the draft board. I believe they failed miserably. And that's also part of this. You look at what their first rounders have done over the last 7 or 8 years, and they've got nothing to show for it.
Yeah, had they taken in 2018, I believe, let's just say these are the names I was pushing at the time, Tristan Casas instead of Connor Scott. And then the following year, Riley Green or CJ Abrams over JJ Bleday, which, I mean, there are others that you could point to have done better. But just those two, let's say it's Riley Green and Tristan Casas. You have your center fielder, left-handed hitting all-star, pure hitter, and Tristan Casas, your big thumping first baseman, and both were from the state of Florida. Casas, of course, from right down here and went to American High School, Heritage High School. And they chose to go with Bleday and Connor Scott. And, I just kind of, before we wrap up on Tanner Scott, the Orioles, for instance, okay, they moved the kid that, I was just telling you about, what's his name? Norby, I think it is. Here, they call up Jackson Holiday. They've added, are the Orioles the winner? Yes, of the trade, because they got Zach Eflin from Tampa Bay, Trevor Rogers from here to help their rotation. Sir Anthony Dominguez helps their bullpen. They got him from Philly. Eloy Jimenez comes in from the White Sox. They also got Christian Pache. They moved out. Austin Hayes went to the Phillies. They moved some people out, but the Orioles are the winners. The Marlins are happy. They got decent prospects, and we're going to touch on something. I kind of want to give where I think the Marlins probably, I think, in my opinion, Bendix's most tactfully best trade yesterday, meaning in terms of executing a very, very good baseball type of trade, was the trade of Tanner Scott and Brian Hoeing going to San Diego for Robbie Snelling, left-handed pitcher, who's not as good as the pitching that they have here, but he was number 2 ranked prospect there, having a down year, but minor leaguer. Adam Mazur, he's a reliever. He probably could be up. He's already been up in the big leagues. They like him. Then infielders, Graham Pauley, who's close to being big league ready, but again, not really a shortstop. And an infielder, Jay Beshears. And what I say I like tactically about that, Holly, is Scott's a rental. So you're probably getting 2 or 3 of the names I mentioned. But when you attach Brian Hoeing, who has role and a value and has been a good performer for the Marlins in a role, he has under club control like 5 more years. He has like a year plus of service time. So roughly 2029 free agent potential. But by doing that, you gave bullpen, a little more longer range outlook. So that, to me, that trade might be, the 2 pitchers and let's say Paulie for Scott. And then you also got, let's say, Beshears for Hoeing. So I think that from a strategic way, I do like that. I think they maximize that. But it takes us back to, you just blew up a bullpen. And what you saw, that line I read last night in Tampa, is kind of going to be par for the course over the remaining part of this season. Now, Holly, I want to switch gears because, we kind of touched on this and I'm seeing it, and maybe it's a societal thing where winning doesn't seem to be as important anymore. And, where, it's like you're praised for not going for it and you're criticized for going for it. And I think I might have even tweeted it to somebody, but it's almost like everything's twisted.
Yeah.
In the eyes of the perception is the winners are the sellers who are getting the prospects, and the losers are the competing the contenders who are adding the established players. Well, my answer to those last night, it happened, and the beauty of having the MLB, the at bat or whatever, where I could see all the games. I'm watching Jazz play against the Phillies, against our good friend Real Muto. That Yankees-Philly game was amazing with the energy. It went to extra innings. Yankees pulled it out. Jazz had a monster game. And then I flipped over after the Diamondbacks were winning 17-0. I watched the end of the Dodgers-Padres, and Petco Park, Holly, was electric. And they even there's like 49,000. The Padres rally with 2 homers in the 9th, win it in the 10th. And they are clearly, by getting Tanner Scott and a few of the others moves, they are aiming for LA in the division. Yeah. The winners are baseball's, the teams that care, and the energy there. That, to me, they are the winners. That's what Tanner Scott is now going to pitch in that type of environment. And Arizona, between Arizona, LA, and the Padres, it's going to be an electric sprint to the finish. And to me, that's what I thought baseball was about. Yes. Trying to win and get to the postseason. Right. But the tone is the winners are the sellers because, oh my gosh, they got this prospect on the way.
Well, you can see, even a fan can see this, is that we have taken the word winning and redefined it. And that's the unfortunate part of what baseball has, it really has become, is that the winning that you and I cling to and that we lived our lives putting it out there, in the way that we did. I did as a player, just wanting to win at the major league level, wanting to win wherever I was at, like just being obsessed with winning meant winning the game, winning the division, winning the PCL championship. It meant winning in LA. It meant winning in Miami. It meant like winning. That's what winning was. And for a fan, winning means winning on the major league field. It's that simple. That's the definition. It's saying, I want to win at the professional, at the highest level, which is the major league level. And What baseball has strategically done is redefine winning. And for a lot of the organizations and a lot of these teams, winning means the prospect chatter, winning the prospect battle. This is the highlight of their season. It's redefining the word, and it's the unfortunate part of what we've become, because this is not like the NFL where teams like Buffalo and places like Kansas City. No, it's not just the New Yorks and the LAs that are going to constantly compete. You're going to have markets that are going to be able to continue to compete at different levels. I even think of the Florida football teams like Jacksonville, and they're always in the mix.
Tampa Bay, you're right.
With the conversation, it's not going to be every year we've got a chance to win, but it's going to be in a 10-year period, we're going to have a chance to win at some point, because it's how the systems run. This is us constantly repeating the same cycle in my lifetime from 20 to 50, 30 years, the same cycle. I mean, you can go back to my early years, and some of these down teams are still the same down teams that they were 30 years ago. And organizationally, they're not advancing that idea of what winning actually means. And so if you're winning the prospect battle, that's an organizational celebration, but nobody else is celebrating you, because the only winning that matters to me is winning on the field and winning at the major league level. So you can continue to throw all the prospects out there all you want. You can chatter them up all you want. I can promise you this: for every 5 prospects you hand me, no matter how high they are, 3 or 4 of them are not going to make it. They're not going to stick. They're not going to be 10-year big league veterans. It's the way the system works. It's an intense sport. It's a very hard sport. And the one thing that I've learned in my 30 years, especially on the player side, the pitching side is a little bit of a different conversation, but on the player side is culture matters. I think back a lot of times over guys that I watched their careers, and I look at where their destinations were, and it went, good culture, good place to hit, and all, and then you look at the career map and you're like, wow, that's a good run. And you look at other players and it's, bad hitting environment, bad culture. And you're like, man, that guy just was like clinging to life at all times. He just never was given that opportunity to perform in a place that, it either establishes a good culture. I mean, and what I'm saying about that is just so that, our fans understand what I'm talking about. When you, like, we'll use Jackson Holliday right now. I completely expect Jackson Holliday to step into Baltimore and start to perform at a much higher level than what we saw a little bit earlier this year. This kid can play, and his DNA tells me that. I know his dad, and he's in an environment that is going to raise him right. So he's going to turn into a good baseball player. I'd be shocked if he didn't. And that is as much a testament to the culture that they've developed there as it is the lineup that he's going to join. When you step into a lineup with 4 or 5 guys with OPSs over 800, you're going to be expected to hit. Your 500, 600 OPS doesn't work. You see what I'm saying? It's like, I got to step my game up. Everybody else around me's figured it out. I got to figure it out. So let's get it going. And so that's the stuff that I'm talking about that pushes you. When you ask young players to be individuals, it doesn't work, because they're not even sure at a young age, what's my ceiling? Am I a 20 homer guy? Am I a 30 homer guy? Am I a 300 hitter? How do I fit? And that matters to hitters. And we see that in youth baseball. We see that at the highest level. When hitters are in good hitting environments and they're in good places and good lineups with guys who know what they're doing, they're going to be raised. They're going to watch. They're going to learn. They're going to perceive. They're going to get better. When you isolate them and just ask young players to stand alone and be great, change my culture, very rarely does it ever work, because only players like Bryce Harper or Aaron Judge and my generation, guys like a Piazza, are going to be guys who are going to come in and they're going to hit wherever they go, because they're that type of player. But there's very few of them. The rest of us are all looking to fit into a nice place that's going to help my game get better. What I bring to the table is going to make our lineup better. And that's what you want. And so the prospect conversation is, it's okay. I get it. As a fan, you want to be hopeful, but at the same time, it's like the idea of, okay, well, if you're going to do this, then you need to plan on bringing 5 of these guys all the way through the system together, so that they're playing together, so that they're learning together. It can't just be one guy's coming up 1 year, 2 years from now, another guy's coming up, and now you're all disconnected. It's got to be some form of consistency, loyalty, education and raising these guys right. But back to your original point, sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent.
No.
You're right. It's going to be exciting. I mean, I am so excited for the teams that chose to be buyers because they're telling their fan base, we're in, we're going for it. We may be, a few games behind, 5 games behind for a couple of these teams in the division, but with a good run, we can push forward. And when everybody's pulling in the same direction, which is health, you're going to get guys that are going to step up. How many times in the last 5 years, Joe, have we seen players who have gotten traded? Soler's the first guy that comes to my mind because I think of the run with the Braves. He gets traded to the Braves, and all of a sudden he looks like the greatest hitter on the planet. And it's because his culture, his place, all of it came together. He was swinging a hot bat, and all of a sudden he takes it to another level, and you go out and you win a championship. So that's kind of how this works. I mean, the game hasn't changed that much. I mean, we can talk about all the analytics we want, and prospects are fine and dandy. But for me, and I think for you, Joe, but I won't speak for you, winning is winning a championship. It's winning the division. It's going to the postseason consistently. That's the winning that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm going to read you here, and it's funny, like AJ Preller, and I'm going to mention a point about Preller. Yeah, I'm reading a quote from him. He goes, obviously, he's a guy who trades, and he's not afraid to trade. Obviously, Dombrowski did the same thing, trading prospects for a rental starter. He goes, one thing we're never scared of, we're going to trade players. I don't know the philosophically of it, if it's right, wrong. But we're going to trade players. They're going to show up in the big leagues, at least our organization is, and are going to do really good things. But if we get what we're looking, if we get what we're looking to do, and it works for us this year and over the next 3 or 5 years, we're content with that. Then he adds, Billy Beane used to tell me that when I would talk trade with him, he would always tell me, I've traded all-stars, MVPs, Cy Young winners, and 20 years later, we've done a lot of winning, and we're still in this spot. So, obviously they move people, and case in point is a lot of people were banging on the Padres because last year, whatever, they traded for Juan Soto, and they got rid of C.J. Abrams and James Wood and Mackenzie Gore, 3 really good young players now with Washington. But what else did they do? If the Marlins did something like that, it would just be like, oh, my gosh, you can't win because we traded C.J. Abrams and whatever, so we can't make that trade. The guy who hit the home run yesterday in the 9th inning because they were trailing 5-3, Manny Machado homered in the 9th off Blake Trinan, who's not easy to get hits off of, homers to make it 5-4. Jackson Merrill, a prospect that they got, he hits the game-tying home run. So the point being was one of their other prospects came up, and that's the point. You're performing at the big league level, so you trade. So point being to the organizations that sold, that sent prospects away. Most of these organizations are talented enough to have other prospects that could come in, or the prospects they moved were behind guys that they were blocked in. And that was one reason why Arizona traded De Los Santos is they got Christian Walker. Even though he's a free agent, it looks like he's going to resign because they seem to have a home there. So when you get a guy who's blocked, or you feel you got another guy in your system that could also be that kind of player, that gives you the freedom to do what Arizona did, to move a powerful hitter for 2 years of control for a lefty who throws 97 and 99. Well, and they need bullpen help.
100%. But you also have, I mean, the message is consistent, and fans can trust the message, and that's the point. It's if you were a Padres fan, and as you were kind of going over their last few years of history, if I was a Padres fan, I definitely would have had emotional responses to Soto and the buying and the selling, all that's happened. But the philosophy hasn't changed, Joe. See what I'm saying? That, and if I'm a fan, I can buy the philosophy. I may not love you. You just traded my favorite player, and I'm going to be angry at you for a little while, but there's going to be an answer that's coming. And that's what fans trusted. That's what fans buy into, and that's what fans go to the ballpark consistently to do. I'm not talking about the people who are like, hey, there's a game today. Let's go see our one game this year. I'm talking about the fans that go see 10 games, 15 games, 20 games, season ticket holders, people who are invested in the organization, people who love this great game, and people who are in it to win it. They buy into the philosophy that starts from the front office, works its way down into the dugout, into the manager, into the team, into the organization. You know, it works from top to bottom. It's not that hard to figure out. But that philosophy, whether you like it or not, you accept it because you know that it's going to be this for probably for the next 7 to 10 years, whoever's running your team. When you don't have that and you're in other places where there's just constant turnover and constant change, there's nothing even really for you to trust. In fact, I think what most fans ultimately end up doing is trusting the prospect conversation or the change conversation, thinking that that's a guarantee of going to happen because we never behave like a team that's going to try to win on the big league field.
No, great points. As we're getting close to wrapping this one up, I want to also do a hat tip to the teams that went for it that are getting high grades for going for it. St. Louis Cardinals getting Eric Fetty, Tommy Pham. He's one of those guys. He came, I think he had a grand slam or something like that. Yeah, you know, just as he goes back to St. Louis, I guess they also got reliever Sean Alexander from, I think, Tampa Bay. The Dodgers getting pitcher Jack Flaherty. Seattle, you know, getting Randy Arozarena. You know, they added Justin Turner as well. Mets, you know, getting Jesse Winker, Paul Blackburn. They even got Brazoban from the Marlins. So the Mets are going for it. We kind of noted the Orioles, who they got going. Phillies getting Carlos Estevez, who along with Tanner Scott, those were the premier closers on the market. So they get him. They got Austin Hayes. Phillies are certainly fine, ready to make a roll. And, you know, the Royals. The Royals, their team lost 106 games last year. But they get Michael Lorenzen, Paul DeYoung, Hunter Harvey. So they made some moves as well as they look to, you know, make that big jump. But, again, if you're going to pay, $300 million or whatever it is to Bobby Witt, and you're trying to get a new ballpark and you're trying to sell tickets, that's the other end of this. There is a business side to this. And the rebuild side, especially with the disconnected message that certainly the Marlins gave, because their message back in the offseason was, more in 24 more in 24 was their campaign. That was their offseason marketing campaign. How come I'm the only one to point this out? Like all the other watchdogs, like no one even knows. They say to our face what they're doing, and the people, are we that stupid, or are people just that happy to get a press credential?
Well, right, Joe. I mean, listen, there's a lot of different ways of looking at this one, as far as they're concerned. Most people that I know down here don't pay attention, don't listen anymore because the message is sour and it's not, they don't trust it and they don't believe it. And that's the unfortunate part about it, is that when you're in a place where your words don't matter anymore, yikes, that's scary. And because now you have a fan base that isn't trusting your loyalty. And that's ultimately where this goes, because if what you say doesn't actually start to happen, then it's the same thing with my kids. If I'm giving my kids, my own sons, my daughter, if I'm giving them a message and I'm not consistent and I'm not putting it out there in action as well as in word, then I'm not doing them any favors and they're not going to trust that message anymore. And when you look at organizations that do this, and listen, maybe the Marlins, they really aren't alone. And I know that we've been probably pretty hard on them. But the truth of the matter is that there's enough evidence now that I don't think anybody's going to disagree with anything that we're saying. And I think that there's probably people with the Marlins who know exactly what we're saying, because it's been a transitional message that nobody buys into. And that's the unfortunate part about it. You made a great point with the Padres. If I was a Padre fan, we're dealing with emotions, but we're not dealing with loyalty. You see what I'm saying? And there's a difference there. I may not like what you did last year, but I'm invested because I'm loyal to the process. I may be emotional. The funny thing is, here in Miami, I think emotion is gone.
Yeah.
Along with the loyalty. So, see what I'm saying? It's like, so they're that's a whammy, and that's not going to be good for their future, because nobody's going to trust their future until they win consistently. And that puts even more pressure on you as an organization to turn it around, because really you're just going to stand alone. People aren't going to get invested until you make a run, until you make a long, consistent run where fans will start to come back. And that's never happened here.
Yeah, it's almost like they've kind of to guys like you and me, they're like, yeah, we lost them. Who cares? They'll just kind of mute us or whatnot. And they're going to try to go for the young analytical fan, hopefully that they kind of buy into, this thing. But, good luck with that, for one.
Winning
And
has to matter,
secondly,
Joe. Winning has to matter.
yeah.
It's the whole point. It's the whole point of the game. The whole point of the competition. The whole point of the Olympics. It's the whole point of everything. When it comes to
I guess they just want,
sports is about winning. There's a
participate.
winning and a losing, and yes, we do our best to teach ourselves valuable life lessons through our losing, so that we learn how to win. But that's the whole point. The whole point of this is winning, Joe. That's the whole point of sport. The whole is to compete and to win. It's not to say, hey, listen, we won some other part of this dynamic, because it's not leading you back to the word winning. You can't redefine what winning is. Winning is being the victor. It's being the champion. It's being all of these things, whether it's the individual, whether it's the team, whether it's the organization. You may win. You may in your mind win prospect conversation, but there's no payoff to that unless you turn it into actual winning on the field.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Everyone wants a grade. Everyone wants a ranking. So I see all these young people on Twitter. Oh, it's an A trade deadline. We won the trade deadline. But then you got some of the established people that have been around, but they've all been. I think a lot of it too is, and I know I can kind of look back now. I'm retired as a reporter type of thing, and I'm sure I was guilty of it to a large degree, because once you're in an environment, you kind of have to play the corporate game, but. You see these people obviously want to get along. If you want Peter Bendix to give you scoops, you got to tell him, hey man, you're kicking it, man, you're killing it this year. And then if you're a national person and you sit around and you're like, hey, I'll give you these scoops, just say how bright we are. And then next thing you know, you got people on the network and you got, the reporters, and then everyone's using, the buzzwords, and it's like, oh, that's good. And
let me ask you one quick question, Joe, and
sure.
and we can wrap with this if you want. You and I, we could do this for 4 hours a day. Honestly, we love talking.
But we have to be happy for an hour, because the StreamYard will overcharge me.
But you look at just step back in time like 2 or 3 years ago, and you look at the Washington Nationals. And the Washington Nationals, there was obviously they were moving on from their championship from what was it 5 years ago,
19, I believe.
19, and they were going through what they saw as the potential for a rebuild. The organization was for sale. Like everything just seemed like it was doing one of those. It was kind of caving in on the organization. It was like, oh no. This isn't good for national fans. But when you look at what they've even become here in 2024, in that small little window of 5 years, they've experienced all the highs and the lows that an organization can go through. And you look at them today, do you see them as a promising organization the same way I do? I do.
Well, I mean, right now those poor kids are taking their lumps because they moved.
No, they are, but I mean,
they are. They have a very. Let's put it this way: I trust Mike Risk. Yes,
they're competing.
Yes.
They're competing. Their younger stars are establishing themselves. They've got talent.
Correct.
And they're getting better. I mean, I'm not saying that they're getting ready to win the World Series next year, but you see what I'm saying. It's like you see the vision for the organization and what they're trying to accomplish, even through all of this transition, even through, is the organization going to get sold? Is it going to stay? Is it going to move? Like all of this stuff that's going on around them.
Correct.
They still kept the right people in place to create, to establish confidence in the fan base that we're going to move this thing in the right direction. There's got to be consistency there, and that consistency is what fans buy into. And you're going to watch the Nationals, and I'm not going to sit here and predict the future, because that's hard to do, especially in baseball. But I bet you in the next 2 or 3 years, we're talking about a team that's, preparing itself to contend in the National.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. They clearly are. Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
And this year, this year they kind of hung around close to 500 for the first half. But they also knew not to fool themselves.
Right.
That's the difference. Some of these teams, San Francisco kind of realized we're not really getting the traction. We made some money moves. We tried to do better. So I applaud that. There's a lot of other things I don't like what San Francisco's doing, but at least they could. And that's where the Braves were sitting there. That's why they screwed up the Marlins screwed up the Urias trade. They said there would be no market for him. Well, they said there's going to be no market for Josh Bell. Well, what happens 2 days ago? Christian Walker gets a little oblique feeling discomfort, and we always see it happening. Something happens. The next thing you know, you have a fit with Arizona. So it saves the Marlins I think 2.25. I think the D-backs are picking up 2.25 million, which, and to the Marlins' credit, that's they saved that little bit of money, because otherwise they would have been paying the rest of the 5 or so million that he's owed the rest of the year. So that's why you just never know, but you always try to give yourself the best chance to compete, for the longest amount of time. Or you just say we're in a rebuild like Oakland is doing and letting the kids sink and swim. You kind of see, okay, does this guy look like we want to keep him? But there's no pretense. Here we gave a pretense. But again, we're going to be pushed to the clock, Holly, and we got to get this under an hour. So one last thought, 30 seconds.
Well, Josh Bell's a great one, and it certainly plays into everything that we've been talking about today. Josh Bell gets moved. He didn't get off to the best start down here in Miami. And, it takes you to the veteran part of this conversation, which is, I think for a lot of it matters. What are the Diamondbacks trusting in? They're trusting in this guy's got a track record. He's performed at a very high level. I would expect that he's going to go into Arizona and he's going to probably put up very, very solid numbers for them. And they're going to, obviously it just cost them, a couple of $1 million to make that happen. But those are the players that you start to trust because they have track records. Those track records matter. And it's like even Soler. Soler's not having the best year, but he's got a track record with the Braves, and he was swinging a hot bat over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And you're saying to yourself, this guy's a good fit now. Somebody else might say, no, he doesn't fit here. But Atlanta already knows he fits. See when I point? And it's like, so those veterans actually matter. And when you don't have them, teams don't look to do business with guys who have 100 days in the big leagues. They may be these flamethrowers, but they want to have track records too, and the track records matter.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great way to end this. And Todd Hollandsworth certainly has a track record, and I hope that I, to some degree, do as well. So So with that, I know we rambled on a little bit different one, but our draft podcast did very well. It's our best to date. Let's hope that this sends a message. And again, underlying tone, we want what's best for Miami, and that's why we're passionate about it and hoping that moves are made. And we want the best for all these organizations and these players to be put in situations and positions to succeed. And that's why I think we should not lose focus. The winners were the buyers. Always were the buyers, the winners, because the buyers are playing for something. The sellers are the ones selling hope. And nothing wrong with that. In some markets, our market, that's all we've been given for close to 30 years right now. So, but we're going to give more than hope. We're going to give you this kind of content repeatedly, and we'll have Ali back next week. We're going to transition a little bit to football as well, and multiple sports as the Hitting with Holly keeps growing. And with that, appreciate everyone tuning in, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.